This video shows you how to calculate discounts, margins, and the R-squared test statistic in VBA and Excel. I'll teach you how to do it with the keyboard and without the mouse. Subscribe, hit the like button, and buy my books. Links in the description below. Let's get into the video. I'm going to open up the File Explorer by pressing Windows key 1. Go over to Documents, Cell Workbooks, N key, Modeling. I'll go to Mean Variance Optimization, and I will open my workbook. Alt-Tab to get back over, and then Alt-F4 to close things. So here's the color coding scheme for today's workbook. I recommend that when you're building a workbook, you have your own color coding scheme so that you can follow the workbook easier. This is particularly helpful if you create a workbook today and then you're looking at it 6 months from now and you want to be able to follow what you did. Maybe you don't remember all of it off the top of your head. But for today, blue values are going to be hard-coded, black values contain formulas, purple values contain formulas enabled by so-called Visual Basic for Applications code, which we're going to get into. Control function, page down to get to the next tab. Before I go into this, I'll actually show you the code. So I used function Alt F11 to get to the code. We're going to be discussing the R-squared test statistic, gross margin percentage and gross markup percentages. What are the differences between those two? As well as the annual percentage rate that one is effectively paying for not taking discounts or giving away discounts and not taking them. So the first function I have here is the R-squared test statistic function. And the beautiful thing about this function, as you can see, is it only has one argument, and is in November, which is the number of assets in a portfolio. So that R-squared test statistic is covariances as a percentage of total variances in the portfolio. So it's number of assets times 1 plus the number of assets divided by 2 minus the number of assets, which gives you the covariances. And then you divide that by total variances, which is basically the same as the numerator, but then you don't subtract the number of assets. So the idea here is you want R-squared to be as close to 1 as possible. The R-squared test statistic always ranges from 0 to 1. Then I've got this simple idea of a gross margin percentage versus a gross markup percentage. Both of these, again, very simple but very powerful functions in VBA. You only need 2 arguments, revenue and cost of goods sold. The gross margin percentage is just revenue minus cost of goods sold divided by revenue. And the gross markup percentage is revenue minus cost of goods sold divided by cost of goods sold. Then finally, I have this formula at the bottom, the annual percentage rate formula. And that has 3 arguments: the discount percentage, total days that the customer has to pay the business, as well as the discount days. So you might have terms in the distribution industry, for example, where it's 2 by 10 net 30, meaning the distributor will sell inventory to an end user and simultaneously extend credit on that inventory. And so they'll say you have 2%, you get a 2% discount if you pay us back within 10 days. And then the net 30 means you must pay the distributor back within 30 days. That's what 2 by 10 net 30 means. If they go beyond 30 days, there could be late fees or lawsuits or whatever the case is. So these are the formulas, and the annual percentage rate for giving out discounts is just the discount percentage, the 2%, divided by 1 minus the discount percentage times 365, which is the number of days in a calendar year in the US, divided by total days minus discount days. So total days would be the 30 in my 2x10 net 30 example, and discount days would be 10 in my 2x10 net 30 example. So that's the VBA code. Pretty straightforward, but I think very valuable code to create custom formulas in Excel. Let's press Alt-Tab to get back to the Excel workbook itself. And so you can see here I have 4 rows: revenue, cost of goods sold, gross margin percentage, and gross markup percentage. And for gross margin and gross markup percentage, I used the formulas that I had created in Visual Basic for applications. For revenue, I start with 40 and I add $1 each time, so an incremental $1 increase in sales price. And cost of goods sold stays constant throughout the life of the model. You can see how gross margin and markup change. You'll see that for revenue, it's equal to the sum of Bravo 1 and Alpha 5. The Alpha 5 has a absolute reference, whereas the Bravo 1 has a relative reference. So let's go see what Alpha 5 is. And it's white here, but you can see it in the formula bar. I just put the number 1, I physically hard-coded it in, and then made it the same color as the workbook so that you can't see it, so it doesn't necessarily distract, but it's there, so you can lock it in with an absolute reference to get that $1 increment. For the cost of goods sold, again, that's just equal to Bravo 2 with an absolute reference throughout the entire row. And then these formulas have mixed references where I want to lock in the 1 and the 2, but I don't want to lock in the column, so the column will change. And so I have mixed references based on the markup and margin percentages that I created in Visual Basic for application code. And so you can see the graph. There's an incremental $1 change in sales price. You can see how gross margin and markup change. Gross margin starts to flatten off, and gross margin is capped at 100%. Gross markup continues, by contrast, to grow at a linear rate, and gross margin percentage, or rather, gross markup percentage is capped at infinity, whereas gross margin is capped at 100%. And so, knowing the difference between a markup and a margin, these basic concepts can really help you, and you'd be surprised how many people don't know those things. But now you know how it works and how to build it in Visual Basic for applications in Excel. Next, I'll show you what I was talking about with discounts. A good rough rule of thumb for discounts in business is to always take them and to never give them. I have different discount percentages here, so you just lock in Bravo 1 with a absolute reference, and then Bravo 1, Charlie 1, Delta 1, those are mixed references, or mixed references where I want to lock in the 1 but not lock in the column. Lock in the row but not the column. That's how I created these. Total days, I'm going to keep 30 the whole life of the workbook. Same with discount days, I'm going to hold that constant, so you just do Bravo 2 and Bravo 3. And the idea here is I use the annual percentage rate formula that I created in Visual Basic for applications. So let's say the distributor or some other type of business is offering 1x10 net 30, and the customer takes the discount every 30 days. That's like borrowing, that's effectively the same mathematically as borrowing from the customer at 18.43% per year. And it gets worse as the discount gets bigger. 2x10 net 30, which is quite common in distribution, is costing distributors 37% a year, and that's an annual percentage rate. That's before taking into account monthly compounding periods. So once you take that into account, this number could even be anywhere from, let's say, 25 to 200 basis points higher. And so if you're a distributor, my recommendation is to stop printing discounts on your invoices. Don't print these discount coupons on your invoices, because the customer will take them and you're paying. You think you're only giving them 2%, but it's actually costing you a lot more, as we can see with these formulas, than maybe one would have hoped. Finally, I'm going to show you the R-squared test statistic. This has to do with modern portfolio theory. We created the formula in Visual Basic for application code, and you can see number of assets, sum formula with an absolute reference for Bravo 1, then a relative reference to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so forth, all the way down to 32. And then R-squared test statistic, that's just a mixed reference, lock in the row, keep the column unlocked. And it's using that R-squared test statistic function that I created in Visual Basic for applications. So R-squared is showing you covariances as a percentage of total variances for your portfolio. And R-squared tells you roughly what percentage of the total variance of your portfolio is explained by systematic risk. So modern portfolio theory suggests that you want to get it as close to 1 as possible. What I'm showing you today with this graph is that there's a marginal benefit from diversification effectively. If you go from 1 asset to 2 assets to 3 assets, you can see the R-squared test statistic increases at a rapid rate, but then it starts to flatten off. And once you get to about 32 or so, you could add in 1,000 more assets to your portfolio, and your diversification isn't going to reduce the risk that much, at least according to the R-squared test statistic. Now, R-squared test statistic, which is covariances as a percentage of total variances, that has its own issues with it. Covariance measures the directional relationship between the returns of 2 assets, but it doesn't look at correlation coefficient. Correlation coefficient represents the strength of said directional relationship between the 2 assets. So R-squared is a good rough rule of thumb. Get it as close to 1 as possible, but also recognize there's a marginal benefit to diversification, and there's a point of diminishing returns. And there's other concepts which I've talked about and will continue to talk about on this channel that can help us think about diversification and portfolios and getting the most return for the least amount of risk. But this is just one tool that I thought you might find helpful. So take this knowledge into the marketplace to be a better coder, better user of Excel, and better understand these simple but fundamental business and finance concepts. Have a phenomenal day. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit the notification bell, hit the like button, leave a comment below, and please buy my books. The links to those will be in the description of this video.